Hello everyone, hope you're doing well. I thought we'll go through some predictions for 2023 when it comes to War Thunder. Now, just as a few points, I'm not going to be going over really individual vehicles in this because there's not really much point in that. It's just generally for hype. So instead, what we're going to do is go over some concepts and ideas and mechanics that I think that will be added instead. The other thing to also note is I've just set up a new PC setup now, so if there's anything wrong with the video, let me know, since whenever you bring in something new, especially how technical computers are nowadays, usually something goes wrong. And also, we hit 60,000 subscribers in December, when I was doing and being a little bit busy with all of the general stuff that was going on in War Thunder. So I thought we'd do a Q&A in January, so if you have any questions, make sure to put it in the comments of this video, and I'll fish through them on stream, and we'll go through them, answer them, and make a video on it for the channel as well. So, as always, if you enjoy the content, make sure to like the video and subscribe to the channel. Let's get into some predictions. So the first prediction is, of course, the expansion of Ranked Mode. Now, if you don't know what Ranked Mode is, they basically teased this last year in a little event, which was kind of a playtest mode. It was I suppose it's supposed to be kind of a substitution for the good old squadron battles eventually. They called it the Rankings Challenge, and basically they give you specific vehicles that you can play in specific scenarios, and then you get certain points, and if you get high enough on the leaderboards, then you can get yourself some special vehicles. The idea of this is, at least in the further plans, that they will continue to make these types of modes, and they'll be available through the tournament service that they set up, and then also you'll be able to, have a go at it. They say, we plan to regularly hold new seasons of Rankings Challenge with a duration of a month or more for all types of vehicles and all nations in War Thunder. Apart from the listed formats in the future, there may be special, like races or free deathmatch modes. Some competitions of the Rankings Challenge may become qualifications for larger competitions based on the existing tournament service. Such competitions will likely be held mid-seasons with streams and activities for the viewers. So you can see that generally they're looking to heavily expand this stuff. I've said many times that I find the esports stuff in War Thunder pretty boring, but one of the things that could make it interesting is stuff like races, and is stuff such as weird little challenges, such as assault courses and things like that for the tanks. Kind of like the tank course that we had before, like the tank race where you had to get through the slalom, and then you had to get over the hill, shoot targets, and then go home. That, I thought, was a really cool idea, and I hope they expand on stuff like that. But at the same time, if they just keep doing, 1v1s or 2v2s, it's going to be super boring going forward. But yeah, stuff like this will get heavily more into it, probably this year or next year, depending on the development cycle of it. One of the things to note is they seem to really be trying to push the competitive side of War Thunder, probably for a longevity move, because a lot of experienced players always talk about the fact that they feel like the game is boring because they've already either got everything or they've got all the stuff they wanted and they want a new challenge. I'm not one of those people because I don't see specific vehicles as goals. Instead, I just kind of want to play the game and do the battle passes and do all that stuff. Obviously, the French Navy has to be in here, with the addition of all of the new voice lines when it comes to naval forces. One of them, which was shown, was a fully set of French Navy voice lines. So, if the French Navy doesn't come, it would be incredibly surprising that that isn't the case. The only question is, does it come this year, next year, or the year after? We haven't really had a huge expansion of a naval tech tree in a long time. They've been more focusing on kind of setting up the pre-existing tech trees and adding vehicles to them, and it'll be interesting to see how they tackle France, with, of course, the fact that when it comes to that blue water stuff, France is completely fine. They have a lot of unique vehicles, which would be really fun to play, but their coastal stuff, especially in the early areas, doesn't really exist in a huge way. So maybe France will be the first nation which will have a singular naval tech tree instead of two separate tech trees, but that we'll have to see as it goes forward. The fact is, there is no way that you put that much effort and that much money into a bunch of customized naval lines for a specific nation without adding the actual nation in the game as a playable tech tree. So hopefully we see them soon. Submarines also sit in the same place as the French Navy stuff, since there's a lot of voice lines which are made specifically for submarines in the game. So I can definitely see these things coming, even if it is just one or two of them, just to kind of push forward, the idea of maybe selling some premiums of them, and then next year they come out with some big ones. It'll be interesting to see what they do for different nations here, and what gets what. But at the end of the day, at least it'll be something new for pretty much the major nations that exist. I know a lot of people are looking forward to U-boats and things like that. There's been a lot of talk about them. Submarines and carriers are two of the things that always get brought up when it comes to War Thunder. Don't know why, probably because it's old World of Warships players who didn't like the pain that they had there, so they want to bring the pain into War Thunder. But at the end of the day, submarines are definitely something that are on the horizon, because once again, you don't invest a bunch of money into a bunch of voice lines unless you want to actually push forward a new idea. One of the things that I'm unsure whether it will come this year or next year is electronic countermeasures. And I think this really depends on how crazy the missiles get when it comes to specific vehicles. We saw a massive leap when it came to the last update and how the top tier works for aircraft, with the addition of the F-16s, the MiG-29s, and to a lesser extent, the Tornadoes. And with them came not really new weaponry in a way, but what came along is just more of the very, very advantageous weaponry, and also on platforms which can deliver it easier. If we see another step up in weaponry, I think electronic countermeasures are along the way as well. Basically, from Wikipedia, an electronic countermeasure is an electrical or electronic device designed to trick or deceive radar, sonar, or other detection systems, like infrared or lasers. It may be used both offensively and defensively to deny targeting information to an enemy. The system may make many separate targets appear to the enemy, or make the real target appear to disappear, or move about randomly. So the idea is it's supposed to mask the target from the radar signature. The general thing about this isn't just something that has to be on vehicles which are specifically made for it, such as there is a Tornado, the ECR, which is designed specifically for this role. But also at the same time, there is a bunch of pods that you can put on vehicles, and I'm pretty sure we have those vehicles in the game where you put on these pods and they can act as the ECM. So one of the problems that we're seeing already with buffs to a lot of radar missiles, such as the F-14's missiles, and even some of the AIM-7s, and of course the other missiles from other nations, what you're going to end up having is a lot of people just won't be able to get away from these things, and they will just die over and over and over again. So there's going to be public pressure when it comes to Gaijin, and also public statistical pressure from them to add in more systems to counter missiles coming in. Kind of like when the missiles started going crazy in the game, they started adding a bunch of countermeasures and making them a lot more usable. When the R-60 was first introduced, it was an insane missile, and then they added in the fact that, well, after a few updates, that the R-60 was much more sensitive to flares, so therefore kind of denying its power and giving people a defensive option. Right now, at the highest echelon of the game, there's a lot of vehicles which don't really have defensive options against these types of machines. So I'm sure when it comes in, there will be ECMs added, depending on how badly certain vehicles are going, to be able to help them out. So because of that, my guess is this is going to happen this year, because of the simple fact that we are getting massive leaps in technological prowess, meaning that some vehicles are really going to be left behind and are going to need additional defenses. One of the things I'm surprised we haven't seen more of is the anti-radiation missiles. Anti-radiation missiles, I think, will be brought in a decent way. Basically, the idea of anti-radiation missiles is they are designed to detect and home in on enemy radio emission sources. So these were specifically used in seed missions or suppression of enemy air defense missions. What you would do is you would send in vehicles with these missiles. The radar AAs or radar installments on the ground would obviously detect them, but the missile would detect the installment, and then you fire the missile and it guides itself into those areas. Now, this isn't the only way that you can use these things. You know, you can do surface to surface, surface to air, air to air, depending on which ones you're using. The AGM-88, of course, the HARM is one of the more popular ones that people know about, but there are a bunch of other ones for other nations that could also be added. So it's just kind of weird how we haven't seen these things. They are one of the pieces of munitions that are kind of missing from the game. We got napalm. I suppose cluster bombs, they're still something which is not in there right now, or cluster munitions in general, but anti-radiation missiles are not really showing their head yet. A research idea will probably come in the next few updates as well, and that is the idea of rank 8 ground. If they want to be able to hit a target of being able to reduce the research points needed for a bunch of vehicles in the middle of the year, which they'll probably do with aviation since they just added in rank 8, and then a further expanding rank 8 of aviation in the next few updates, rank 8 ground would have to come along at the same time. It actually makes way more sense to have rank 8 ground because there's way more vehicles at rank 7 for ground than there was rank 7 for aviation. So that will probably be one of the big marketing tools of next year. Hey guys, look, rank 8, here's like 2 or 3 new vehicles. Woo, isn't that amazing? Oh, you guys get hyped over the fact that now your stuff is harder to research. It's such a awful thing. Like it's a really awful thing that we've been seeing over time. But yeah, it's something which happens constantly when it comes to War Thunder. So it's not really a surprise that people get hook, lined, and sinker by it. But yeah, I think rank 8 ground will come in. There'll be 2 or 3 new shinies, probably for the major nations, which will be new MBTs, which will act exactly like the old ones, apart from they'll have a better round, or they'll have slightly better mobility, or they'll have slightly better armor. And then we'll push forward, as we always do. There'll be a bunch of people claiming that they're really broken, and that BR decompression is needed. And then there'll be a bunch of people who are just enjoying them and just battering people with them. And then there'll be people who are at the lower end of the BR range, which will probably be, 10.7, since these vehicles will go to 11.7 or 12.0 eventually. That will be screaming that the game is unfair and that they're losing SL and that everything is wrong and how do I play against these monsters? And then we go around in a circle as we have done for many, many years. I think we'll also get new battleships this year, but what I mean by new battleships is I mean kind of a new era of battleships, so the big barnstormers that you have from the Second World War. Stuff like the Yamato, the Bismarck, maybe not the Iowa, but you know what I mean. Stuff like the King George class and everything like that. All the big battleships that many people resonate with. There'll probably be some premiums alongside of it, since they've actually removed a lot of the premiums from sale or made them GE vehicles. So my guess is we're going to get a big pre-order set of vehicles and maybe a new rank to be able to push these battleships with. And then everybody will get excited, and then it will be fun, and yada, 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 yada. So there is still a ton of different naval vehicles they can add into the game. The only question is how much actual development money they take to put in and whether it's worth it or not. So in order to make it worth it, hype has to be built, pre-orders have to be sold, and people have to be interested. So that is going to be a big meta shift when it comes to War Thunder and Naval. It's going to be absolutely nuts. When you actually think about it, because of the amount of effort that's going to have to go into this to make it profitable. Since we know that Naval is one of the more expensive game modes from individual model points of view, because they're just so big and very high definition, and also at the same time, just the amount of people playing it compared to others. It definitely has increased more recently. I'm getting into more matches. People are obviously enjoying it more, which is really nice. But at the same time, we're going to have to see if that continues, especially when the barnstormers come in, if they do. This is more of a hope than a prediction, but I predicted this many times, and I'm kind of surprised that we haven't seen it yet, and it's the big thumpers. So stuff like the 140mm Abrams, the 140mm Leopard, obviously the Europanzer, the 140mm on that, and then also the 152mm T-80, which was made in the 90s. I'm really surprised we haven't seen these vehicles yet. It's not as if they add anything crazy. Obviously, the Leopard with the 140 is of Swiss descent, so maybe that's got something to do with it. Maybe they're waiting in order to add a subtree or something like that to Germany of Swiss vehicles, but who knows at the end of the day. The thing is, these could easily be the new Rank 8 ground vehicles that get people interested. They could also be squadron vehicles or premium vehicles. These things could be anything. At the end of the day, it's just weird to not see them because they make complete sense in adding to the game at the moment. We had rapid expansion last year when it came to War Thunder, and that might be because it was the 10th year of the game and they had a ton of stuff planned, or it might just be a sign of what's to come when it comes to War Thunder. It's very hard to tell whether last year there was just a ton of effort that was put in, and then this year is going to be more of a get back to normal year, or if they're like, okay, we saw some great results over the last few years and we've just been ramping up everything, why don't we just continue ramping? That means that other nations could easily be along the way. Many people have talked about the idea of a united Korean tech tree. I highly doubt that would happen. I think it would be more likely that you get two sub-nations for Korea in South Korea or North Korea, South Korea going to either America or Russia or even Japan, and then North Korea going to, of course, China, Hungary going to Italy, or Romania going to Italy, or even Switzerland going to Germany. There are many different options for subtech trees for specific nations, which could definitely bolster them and have a little bit of fun with them. And I'm sure since we've had a expansion of subtrees, and also they've talked about in interviews how good subtrees have been when it comes to different nations, that they will push forward with them and eventually they will add them in. The last two are pretty boring. So the first one is the new graphical effects. Of course, they're going to expand the game even more when it comes to its graphical fidelity. They did a huge job last year trying to improve it, and I think they did a pretty good job. Like, War Thunder looks insanely nice nowadays compared to, 5 to 10 years ago. They really have just kept upgrading it over and over and over again, which has been really good. And the other one is changes to weekly decals. One of the things that you may have noticed since December is the weekly decals happened and then they just disappeared. They've just gone. So I don't know what's going on with them, but they're obviously thinking of a new system on how to implement them or just scrapping the system entirely. I thought the weekly decal system was a really nice one. It promoted people playing different nations, it promoted people playing different playstyles, and also gave something to focus on instead of the overall grind of the game. Just like how I think dailies and specials and, battle pass challenges and achievements and even events are really good for taking players' minds off the general grind of the game, weekly decals were great for that too, and there was something to look forward to and something to try out. Now, it is no surprise that when it comes to weekly decals, they're probably not as popular as other parts of the game. I could tell that from even the viewership of the videos when I made on them, but that didn't really matter to me because I thought it was a really important part of the game. And I'm hoping whatever they decide to replace it with will be equally as interesting, at least to me, and also equally as useful for the general player to be able to push forward when it comes to grinding out in the game. That's all the predictions for 2023. Let me know your predictions and also questions for the Q&A when we do it in the comments. As always, I hope you have a wonderful day, and I'll see you next time. I'd like to thank Forge, Siegebreak, Carrion Crow, Nicholas Richardson, Elove Goat, Pyman, Winter Scientist, Merciless Reaper, Orange Tail, Teddy, Daniel Stanton, Moxie, B. Young, and also Sem Arslan, Wilkski, Uncle Bean, Derek R., Bareen, Lafouche, and Samuel Slick for supporting the channel.